All right. Hello and welcome to the World of Art and Magic podcast, where we talk to creatives about their inspirations behind their works and the symbolism and hidden meanings in our favorite writers' work, games, films, or comics. My name is Wes. I'm an illustrator and comic artist. You can find my work in the links below. And I have my friend here, Cliff Jones. Can you give us an introduction?
Hi. Yeah, I go by Cliff Jones Jr. because that's what I found available for a .com address. So you can hit that up. But also I am a junior, so I'm not lying there. Uh, and let me see. So yeah, for my day job, I do web application development and JavaScript. And my background, I have a master's in linguistics. So I was pursuing that, and I was teaching for a while, but I had to go back to doing computer stuff because that just paid so much better and it's easier than teaching because we don't reward teaching very well. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. And then on the side, I'm writing, and the first fiction publication I actually got out there is a short story collection
Okay.
because when I was writing at first, I was writing on Wattpad, just like putting stuff out for free as I was, writing it. And I wrote several short stories, and I had to sort of find a label, just using hashtags for what I was writing, the kind of stuff I was writing, because it's not always science fiction. Sometimes it's more like fantasy, sometimes paranormal, sometimes horror. So it just kind of, it's different things. So I'm trying to like label what is it that I'm writing, and I looked into different kind of niche genre labels, and one that kind of jumped out at me was dream punk. And so basically dream punk is like this, I see it as sort of an extension, a continuation of cyberpunk a bit,
Mhm.
except for it's like when the technology gets so advanced that it becomes invisible and you're kind of past the technology, now it's all mental. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So like anything involving, like virtual worlds inside your head, or hallucinogenic drugs that are meant to alter your perception of reality and things like that,
Mhm.
or just even just stuff that's like mystical, kind of like
Yeah.
shamanistic kind of practices and stuff. So there's yeah, so
Can you
so
show
I
us? Can you
what
show us? Can you show us your books?
Yeah, here's one,
Okay.
Mirror Maze. And
That's a
that's
dope cover. I love that.
edited by me. Oh yeah, this is yeah, it's a great book. It's got it's
Yeah.
pretty thick too. It's got like I forget how many authors, like 22 or so authors in it.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, I mean it's a big one, and I edited the whole thing myself. And so yeah,
Okay.
I mean I got with a small publisher called Fractured Mirror, so I didn't have to deal with all that business side of stuff at least,
Okay.
but I did all the editing work and soliciting the stories and going through and choosing all that. So this is my baby here. And the way I put it together, actually, which was sort of an inspiration I had from a dream, actually, was
Okay.
that it was going to be like a choose your own adventure type format, where after you read one of the stories, you get a little prompt, about telling you which way to go. So you're literally in a maze, basically, more like a labyrinth. There's not you're not really going to hit dead ends, but there's you can go around in the thing. So I had to physically design this labyrinth to
Oh
make
wow.
it to where to make it to where each of the stories is one little room on the path. And so it makes physical sense, actually, which is crazy, and it doesn't need to. I'm just like that. Did I cut out for a minute?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. I just went out for a sec. So basically, yeah, it's a fun read because you can do that. You can read the stories in any order. They're yeah, they're just kind of connected with little prompts like that. And there's a follow up to this coming out, hopefully in December is when we have it planned for. A follow up's called Somniscope, and Somniscope is a similar kind of thing, except for there's only one story per author. This Mirror Maze has a few of the authors have more than one story, like, especially me. I have the most stories, but in it, but but yeah, Somniscope has only one story per author, and they're in a very definite order, and it sort of connects into one big cohesive narrative. So it's
Okay.
it's part short story anthology and part novel. It just connects up into one story. So um, that'll be coming out later this year. And then what recently came out is my solo fiction debut novella called Drek. And
Sure.
this is my artwork on the cover too. So this also is my baby here. So um, and basically this is kind of like inspired in a lot of ways by Philip K. Dick. I got really into Philip K. Dick, and it's a sort of a retelling, a very loose technological sort of retelling of the Faust myth of, like, making a deal with the devil, that kind of thing. And so yeah, in this analogy, the tech is kind of like the devil. It's kind of like the the trade-off. There's a big trade-off whenever you're getting into these systems, with like AI and social media and all that.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot for us to talk about here.
Yeah.
Well, first off, the both of your books look really cool, and I'm gonna make sure to include all of your links in the description below for those who want to read them. When I first came across your work, I could tell by the covers of your books. For some reason, there was something about them that felt like that older science fiction that I grew up with. Like the covers, that you pick, because most of them now, it's like either some photo bash cover or it's like a AI generated or something. But
Oh yeah.
I remember going to like the used bookstore and picking up like a Philip K. Dick novel, and you would have this really creative cover, and so that's what your work reminded me of. And
Oh,
so it
awesome.
wasn't really,
Yeah, I
it
love
was,
those covers. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess it's cool to see that like there's still a lot of people that get inspiration from his work. You recently just did like a Comic Con where
Yeah.
you were talking about Philip K. Dick.
Yeah. And actually, I was just about to mention a fellow author, friend of mine that I met at Comic Con, called Keith Giles.
Okay.
And he's a theologian also. And
Okay.
and he recently created a little group on Facebook that's called that's about that cover artist named Bob Pepper. So the one that's responsible for so much of those really cool Philip K. Dick covers
Mhm.
is named Bob Pepper, and he does
Okay.
a lot of kind of like psychedelic stuff from back then. Uh, so yeah, let me see. So that's really cool to hear my covers compared to that, because like, for example, like there's the Palmer Eldritch cover for one,
Yeah,
kind of just
love
showing you
it.
my phone, but yeah, in the Scanner Darkly, both of
Yeah.
those have this like kind of trippy thing
Mhm.
going on, but it's also a person that's looking at you basically, and I like that,
Mhm.
or looking at you, or maybe like this one, kind of like looking past you, not really at you. But
Mhm.
this was done by the wife of one of the authors in this book. So
Okay.
her name's Gemma Martinez, and
Mhm.
she yeah, the author. Yeah, anyway, so that was just, she's done uh covers for his work. I don't want to get that wrong though, who that is. So it's
Mhm.
David Pierre. David
Okay.
Pierre. Yeah. David Pierre is the author. Anyway, so he's in this book. It's really cool. Um, but yeah, and actually, since I was a kid, when I was a kid, my big interest was art actually, and I don't know if you've ever seen like the Draw Squad with Mark Kistler, Commander Mark. He's just
Mm.
on public television, and I watched it all the time when I was growing up. Like, you just draw along with him. And
Mhm.
actually, yeah, he was at Comic Con this year too, Mark
Really?
Kistler. So yeah, it kind of comes around, you
What
know.
what is his name?
Mark Kistler with a K, Kistler.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's just like a really great, he draws cartoon stuff really, and
Okay.
he has books, teaching you to draw, mostly cartoon stuff. There's some realistic stuff too. It's just, it's all about getting kids excited about drawing and learning to draw and stuff. So, but yeah, I was going to say that even when I was a kid, I always would draw like faces mostly. That's like the main thing. So even if
Mhm.
it's an animal or something, or even an ant, I'm basically focused on the face,
Mhm. Yeah.
So I did this from like a photo kind of, I took a couple of photos, put
Mhm.
them into like a Photoshop program,
Mhm.
and I made the ant turn his head because I wanted it to be looking at you, you know. So I took two photos and stuck them together, to base that on.
What was the Comic Con about? Because you said it was about Philip K. Dick that you just did?
Yes, it had just different people that are, big time fans or kind of involved with his work in some way. There was one, man, I don't want to say people's names wrong. I'm not going to try to remember everyone's names, but but yeah, one guy wrote the original screenplay for like what would become Screamers. That's like sort of based on Phil's story that is like second generation, is it second variety, you know, that sort of connects up to Terminator basically. So they kind of took what this guy did and eventually became Terminator, you know, and
Yeah.
and then there was a couple of people that worked on Radio Free Albemuth, you know, the movie.
Uh-huh.
That's like,
Yeah.
so there's the director and the producer were both on the panel with me from Radio Free Albemuth, and they're going to be adapting a couple more things by PKD soon. So that'd be cool. I think Valis and what's the other one? Flow My Tears, I think, is the other one.
Really?
I'm
That'll
not
be
sure. Maybe that's wishful thinking. Maybe it wasn't Flow My Tears, but you know, it's a couple of big ones, you know. But
Yeah, what's interesting about his work, you know, you're saying like a second variety is so closely related to like Terminator.
mhm,
There's so many pop culture ideas that have like their lineage in Philip's work,
right.
right? Like, I was thinking this as I'm adapting Philip K. Dick's short stories into comics, and so I've adapted The Hanging Stranger, which you can get the first 2 issues of my comic series. You can get them in the link below for free. But I adapted The Hanging Stranger, and now I'm adapting The Golden Man. And what I've noticed about The Golden Man is that it's really a precursor for the X-Men.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the story is it's all set up there. There's a nuclear holocaust or a nuclear war, and basically people become either superhuman or super deformed.
Yeah.
And then you have like this government tactical squad called the DCA, which are basically out and they're trying to wipe out the mutants, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then you have the Golden Man, who is like this. His power is beyond. He has the ability to perceive beyond space and time, and he can manipulate things the way that he wants. And so it's interesting to me that like it's not just we think about it in terms of just Blade Runner, right? Like Blade Runner had this seminal effect on so much of pop culture with the aesthetic, the cyberpunk aesthetic that
Mhm.
has influenced so many science fiction films, the ideas that have inspired other films, but nobody's ever really. I don't think everybody's really ever gotten at the heart of that story. Um, but there's plenty of others. Like he has so many ideas in his
Yeah.
work
Yeah,
that people.
like the Matrix for one thing. The Matrix is not
Yeah,
necessarily like a retelling of a specific story, but it's just like the thing that Philip K. Dick kept doing over and over with like the wait a minute, this whole world is not real. It's all a simulation. It's all it's he had that come up, you know.
yeah. What? So we talked before that you've read through his journals, which I've been. If you follow my YouTube channel, I've been taking his journals and I've been using those as a way to analyze Blade Runner and like some of the subtext of Blade Runner, as well as Minority Report. What do you think about his journals that were published?
Well, I mean, I think for for big time fans like me, it's really great because it's you can see his thought process and what he's going through, like philosophically, like the stuff. It's basically, I think even reading Philip K. Dick novels, you wind up getting a list of philosophers that you need to look into. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because he throws stuff like that in there, like no big deal. Like some blue collar worker just is talking about this, or like symphonies and just like really highbrow kind of stuff just gets thrown in there and it makes you feel like, oh man, I better read that. This guy, but in the exegesis, in his notes, it's really like taken up to the next level to where he'll just he'll obsess about stuff and go down this path and work stuff out, and then he'll think he's solved it, but then something else will kind of like come up and bother him, and he'll go a completely different direction. And I think that whole process is really something to experience, because yeah, he doesn't wind up with definitive answers really. He kind of works out one theory after another, and even as the pages go on, you don't get like, okay, this part's set, now I'm going to build onto the next part. It's not really like that. It's always just like, I've got it 100%, and then it's like, no, that was all garbage, I'm going this other way now, you know. And so
Mhm.
it just keeps going, and it's like, that's okay, that's being alive and thinking and trying to figure stuff out, even though it's a Sisyphean task. just like in Blade Runner or Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. There's a Mercerism that's completely left out of Blade Runner, the movie. But Mercer is this figure that's like Sisyphus, basically, that has to keep going up the mountain, and every time he gets stones thrown at him and eventually falls back down and dies, but then he comes back and he does it again. So he's like part Sisyphus, part Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, his stuff has like that mythological quality to it, and you can really see those influences in his journals. And I think what's interesting about it is like he never expected those journals to be published. So
Yeah.
you're seeing like the raw thought process of somebody who had these who had mystical experiences and was trying to figure out like what happened.
Yeah.
Like what was this experience? And it seems like from I guess we have like one recording of him speaking at a science fiction festival, right? It's only that one at the French.
In France, yeah.
Yeah. But when he's talking about this idea of time being orthogonal, like it's not linear, more like we're constantly shifting into like parallel universes, but every moment is like it's like its own world in a sense, and we're just moving from one to the next. I mean, I there's other authors and stuff it is that I've read, as well as like things that are in this realm in terms of like like quantum mechanics and that sort of thing. It seems like it makes sense. It seems I don't know what your interpretation of it, his like mystical experiences were, but it seems like like what he says, it makes sense. Like we're not moving through linear time. We're moving through like different. It's almost like different parallel universes, right?
Yeah, it's really something. It's sort of like like people will be really familiar with in the Matrix. There's the cat repeats, and it's a glitch in the Matrix, and that's deja vu because something was edited in the past. Basically, that's straight out of Philip K. Dick's theorizing that it's like, well, when we experience deja vu, it's because something was edited in our past and it affected everything in the future, and then we have for a minute we have this memory from the previous reality, and now we're in the current reality, and things don't quite fit for a sec, but then we get okay with it. It's like he really works stuff out in this very high-tech kind of way, for considering he died in 1982. You know what I mean? It's very much like, but also when you talk about reality maybe being like a computer simulation, it's not like a computer simulation the way that you would think, like a physical. I mean, the idea is basically, if there's something that's that far advanced, that's behind our whole reality and everything we perceive, it's not going to really look much like what we think of a computer as,
Yeah.
So the question of like, oh, is it a computer or is it spiritual? It's like, well, that's not much of a question. We don't understand anything beyond our reality. So, you know what I mean? So that doesn't make a lot of sense, to pin down what it is.
Yeah, what I find is like really interesting about his work, and it's somebody that I've mentioned on this podcast before. There's a guy named Neville Goddard, and I don't know if you know who he is, but he has like some pretty interesting interpretations of the Bible, and his ideas of like forgiveness and revision and these sort of things. It's interesting to me that it falls right in line. It falls very much parallel to what Philip K. Dick talked about whenever he has these characters that are precogs, right?
Right.
And is it? I think it's in Ubik where one of the characters, one of the girl characters, is a precog, and she does exactly what you're talking about as far as like editing the past, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like she changes, and the way he does it is so subtle and it's so interesting. Like the characters are talking, and like the guy's holding a red cup, and then in the next scene he's holding a blue cup.
Yeah.
And so she's like going back in and she's editing reality and changing things around. And
I like that. He gives you a chance to be like, is this a mistake? Did I read this wrong? But then he kind of makes it a little bit more clear. So at some point you have to figure it out, what, this was on purpose,
Yeah. And so what's interesting to me about that is that that seems to be in line with like with some of the writers it is that I follow, like Neville Goddard and his idea of like revision, and his ideas of like what forgiveness actually means.
Mhm.
Um, the way that I've heard forgiveness explained is that um, the reason why it is that you forgive people is because everything that you're experiencing in your reality is just a reflection of your own state of mind.
Mhm.
So you really can't necessarily hold people accountable. If I mean, you should hold people accountable, but all of reality is configuring itself around that state of mind it is that you have. So if you see yourself as somebody who is, like, I don't know, a victim or something like
Mhm.
that, you will find yourself surrounded by people that are going to act that out with you,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so in a sense, you can forgive those people because uh, the cause ultimately is your own state of awareness. It's your own state of being. It's the way it is that you're perceiving things.
Yeah,
And I
that's
feel like that's in line with what Philip K. Dick was
yeah, yeah.
trying to portray in his books.
Yeah, and that's like a much more fleshed out, like, nice version of the saying, like, your vibe attracts your tribe, you know?
Yeah.
That's like the real pop wisdom kind of thing of, yeah, that
Mhm.
but, that made me think also that, I mentioned, Keith Giles, that
Okay.
was on the
Yeah.
panel with me.
Yeah.
You would probably really like his stuff, because I recently, because I knew I was gonna be on the panel with him, I read his book, Sola Deus, and that was really awesome. And Sola Mysterium is another one that he recommended to me. And that's more like, yeah, the Sola Deus. The little tagline says, "What if God is all of us?" And the Sola Mysterium is more about less tied to religion exactly, but more about just like the nature of everything. So yeah, this is really relevant stuff. And since I
Mhm.
did mention like everybody else on the panel, I should also mention my friend Cameron Mitchell, who
Okay.
he's an organizer of the PKD festival in Colorado. That the third one's going to be coming up, I think this coming June. This summer, I think the Philip K. Dick Festival in Fort Morgan, Colorado.
Okay.
So anybody interested in the area, come on out, hang with other Philip K. Dick nerds. You know.
Yeah. What I think is interesting about his what I think is interesting about the people that gather around his work is that they're interested in talking about stuff that's like a little bit more on the psychedelic end.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like I like hard science fiction, and I like that. I like any kind of science fiction, but his stuff kind of, it's so uniquely his, um, that there's lots of really interesting conversations to be
Yeah.
had around his work.
Yeah, for better or worse, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that will bug people about Philip K. Dick's work, or about his personality and his life and everything, sure. But the thing is, it's a very distinctive, kind of journey that he went on, and he documented everything, and so
Yeah.
I just find it fascinating.
Do you? Yeah. So I've actually reached out to some of the other people on that panel. I never got a response from Keith, but maybe we can talk about that afterwards.
Okay.
But yeah. So like whenever you're writing these books, you said that your original novella that you just did.
Mhm.
First off, how long did that take you to write, and what was the original inspiration behind that?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, actually, before, like I said, I was writing on Wattpad, like short stories and stuff. But the main thing
Okay.
before I was really writing short stories is I started a big fantasy novel that's not exactly, it's more like kind of science fantasy. It's definitely dreampunk though, is what it is. So
Okay.
that's still in progress. Hopefully it'll be finished this year.
Hmm.
It's going to be called The Lasting Lands. And it's sort of like, it involves elements of like Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz and that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
but yeah, it also involves Mars. It's, anyway. Um, but yeah, so I've had that in progress forever. And meanwhile, on Wattpad, there would be like little contests that I couldn't resist entering for short stories. And one of them was about fairy tale retelling. So,
Hmm.
and because partly because of my influence from Philip K. Dick, because I know he was a big fan of the Faust myth, and he was saying like everybody wants to do one of those at some point, and he did it a couple times, and he was anyway. I know his last book that he didn't actually write, The Owl in Daylight, was definitely going to have a big kind of a Faust retelling to it. And so yeah, that's what I did basically with the first part of this book. So it's just a novella, but it's sort of like it's got 3 parts to it. And the first part I actually wrote as a short story on its own, and
Mhm.
and I've modified it a bunch since then, and kind of tied it into the bigger story. But that's what I started with. And so the character names are actually loosely, you can connect them up to character names in the Faust myth, but mostly in Goethe's Faust. But then also there was a version of that beforehand that was pretty big. Christopher Marlowe, I think, wrote it, called Dr. Faustus. It's just like the same story, but it's got a couple extra characters there. Um, so yeah, I was basically writing that, and then I for some reason was inspired to write a similar kind of story involving different tech and involving basically the same characters, but so anyway, so the second part out of 3 is itself kind of like a standalone short story, but it's very connected to the first one. And then the third part I wrote to sort of connect everything together and flesh that out and make it one cohesive unit. So I only did that third part after Mirror Maze was already written and edited, So I'm waiting for Mirror Maze to get, to go through the publisher and to get out. And I'm just like, I'm going to strike while the iron's hot, and I'm going to finish this other story I've been working on for no good reason,
Yeah.
and get that actually published. And so yeah, so I'm going to have these 3, books out, including Somniscope that's going to come out. I'm going to have those out before I'm even finished with my big novel that started the whole thing, probably.
That seems like that's kind of how it happens sometimes. That's what's interesting about the creative thing is like, I don't know how you feel about it, but um, like I've come out here to Thailand and I've just been able to just focus completely on doing my illustration and doing the comics. And uh, what's interesting to me is that the creative the creative task is all about just like submitting to your intuition and just
Mhm.
letting it guide you. And sometimes it seems like it's taking you around a long bend
Oh yeah.
and you're like, but there's like this urge, there's this feeling like, no, I need to go and do this thing. And it seems like that's what you have to follow.
Yeah.
Like there's a guy that I listen to, his name is Bashar, and he has an interesting way of explaining it. Um, he says that that following your excitement, whenever you follow your excitement, it's like it comes as a complete kit. It comes with everything it is that you need in order for that thing to actually be actualized. Because it's like we were talking about, you're moving through. We're not moving through time and space, so that version of yourself that is the author you want to be or the artist or
Mhm.
whatever it is you want to be, it's already complete, and that's what the synchronicities are. And so those things are just given to you as you are able to move through those different states, right? And it's sorry, my mind is kind of wandering here a little bit. What's interesting to me is that it seems like sometimes it seems like it's taken you a long time to get around the bend to get back to where it is that you were, but you'll always be able to look back and
Mhm.
see how those things are connected together.
Right,
You know what
right.
I'm saying?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's where I wind up with the writing. I mean, for example, like I said, I studied linguistics, just because
Mhm.
I was really distracted from my computer science degree, because I was working on like language construction, just like making artificial language, just because there's no good
Mhm.
reason at all. Because I
Yeah.
wasn't even writing fiction at the time. I was just making this language and, of different languages, working on them. And so but then I wound up getting the linguistics degree, and then I wound up going back to school basically to put my student loans on hold a little while longer. And so then I had a graduate degree in linguistics, and with that I could actually teach. And so I did some teaching, but it's really hard to get like I was at a community college, and it's really hard to get a full time position. They have 70% of the English staff, is part time basically, and that's the law. They couldn't, at least in Texas, that's how it is. It's like you can't do more than 70% part time. There has to be some full time people there, and so
Yeah.
they went right up to 70% always because it's the cheapest.
Mhm.
And so basically, I got a somewhat lucky break in order to get a full time staff position. So I was managing the writing center. Like halfway through the
Nice.
first semester I was working there, I got to manage the new writing center that they put together, and so I really I get to have a hand in putting it together and all that. And so that was really unexpected kind of opportunity. And for me, it was different because I didn't barely study any. writing, like in college. I had like advanced English in high school that let me kind of test out of the basic English for college. And then I was studying computer science and then linguistics. So I didn't really study anything about composition and all that. And then now I'm tutoring people and teaching them in that subject. So I had to really learn it. And
Yeah.
so it's funny because, now that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm doing. And I'm using stuff that I had to learn for a previous job that I just fell into.
Yeah, that's how it seems to work. It's like we can't see the big picture of our lives, but there's a higher self version of us, I guess, that is able to see that and can tell you, take the left instead of the right, or take the right instead of the left. And at
Like
the
that
moment,
like
you're
that
just
Doctor
like,
Who episode, you know what I'm talking about?
which one is that?
Oh, no, it was I think it was Donna was on there. I don't know. Is it kind of recent? I mean, not that recent, jeez. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think the 10th Doctor.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know if you follow it, but
Yeah.
yeah, basically it was the whole episode's like she's at a stop sign or something, or a light, and she takes a left instead of right or something like that. And
Yeah.
big time spoiler for the episode, there was some sort of a insect looking parasite on the back of her in real reality. And so this whole episode's not taking place in actual reality. This whole episode's inside her head. And
Whoa.
that's a very Philip K. Dick kind of thing. That's very dream
Yeah.
punk. And
Uh-huh.
and so she's able to break out of it by taking the other turn. So it just reminded me of it when you said that.
Oh wow. Yeah, man, his work has had so much influence over everything. Like I was thinking about this whenever I was thinking about like what parts of what films would I want to analyze of his. He's spot on about so many different things, like corporate culture basically owning literally everything.
And
Um,
advertisements being everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And disguised
Advertisements.
advertisements too. You don't even know they're advertisements. They're just there. Like in the Truman Show, for example, another
Yes.
another movie that was very influenced by his work,
Yep.
I think.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's like everything's just happening normally, and then the character's just telling you about this coffee, in a way that's funny. It's kind of like in Ubik, the product advertisement, so cheesy.
One of my favorite scenes in his books is the opening of Ubik, when the guy can't get out of his apartment without paying like 50 cents to open up his door.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's hilarious. But I mean, it's like it's true. Like that's what's so
yeah.
so great about his work is
Oh,
like, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say also in that particular scene, I noticed too, it's about like you gotta check the terms of service, because he's saying like the coin I put in is a gratuity. He's telling the robotic door that's a gratuity. I don't have to do that. And he's like, and then the door's like, I think you'll find if you check the contract that it's not that's not the case. You know, it's like we just agree to these terms of service all the time, and then we were like, oh great, really? That's what I signed up for? You know?
Yeah. So in your book, from the research it is that you've done, you were saying like this artificial intelligence, this Faustian myth, making a deal with the devil. I mean, it seems like uh, it seems like that's what it is that we're walking into. I think that what Philip was getting at in his journals was that artificial intelligence, from his point of view, is a fake version of the logos. That it's an artificial version of it, and that people won't be able to tell the difference between the real logos and the fake one. But the fake one will be owned by like a corporation,
Hmm,
which
interesting.
is interesting
Yeah,
because like that goes into are you a fan of Metal Gear Solid?
I'm not very familiar now.
Okay, so you're not a gamer at all?
Well, not really. My wife's more the gamer. She's
Okay.
plays a lot. I've played like Grand Theft Auto and stuff, and I love the old like old Mario and stuff like that. But I haven't got into anything that much.
So Metal Gear Solid 2, it actually has some Philip K. Dick connections as well. Um, so in the second game, there's the ending scene where like the villain is doing the big reveal speech and he's explaining his motives and whatnot. And what you find out is that you have been talking to an artificial intelligence the entire time. You
Mhm.
never actually saw the people physically
Yeah,
because it was always on a codec, but what you were talking to was an artificial intelligence. And the artificial intelligence explains that they created this program, which is the game itself that you're playing, in order to
nice.
create context for the amount of trivial information that human beings create, right? So it's a really interesting concept. Like I'll send you the video of it, and you can check it out. I've talked about it here on the podcast before, but essentially the idea was that we create so much trivial information that we cannot tell the difference between what is true and what is false anymore.
Mhm.
And so AI has to develop some sort of a context in order to be able to define what is true and what isn't.
Right, right. That's just like the thing about in linguistics. You know, in formal linguistics, one big uh, one big goal that people have is creating a formal system that will describe like all the you know basically all the grammatical sentences of English ever that might be uttered by a native speaker. Basically, those are the terms as far as as far as what's grammatical and what's not is like would a native speaker of the language say this? You know, and
Okay.
you know it's very subjective. You know,
Yeah.
but basically, yeah, if you can you define those kind of systems, that's called, I mean, that's the formal representation of the grammar. And people have been doing that, you know, since before computers, of course. But if you can do a computer version of it, and you know, that's great because then you can actually test it, you know, really rapidly, you know, and you can maybe get some use out of it too. And yeah, I was going to say though, that type of system, the best way to get all the rules of the grammar into that is not to just type them all in one by one because there's just way too many. There's basically every word in the language has its own sort of unique way of behaving, and so basically you need a system that learns the rules of the grammar, you know.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
then the problem you run into is like, well, when kids are learning the grammar, they're not just learning abstract rules, they have meaning, you know. So
Yeah.
the real way to teach a computer all the rules of English grammar is to have the computer in a simulated world growing up like a human child. That's basically what you have to do if you really want to get it accurate, you know. So yeah, it's the
Okay.
same kind of thing, and that's in linguistics, you know.
So what is the synopsis of your novel? Like how does this? Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, for of Drek, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a short novel. It's what you would call a novella,
Mhm.
but it's you know it's like 130 something pages, but
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to give away too much, you know, but I'll give a little teaser more than a synopsis, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
basically, I mean, I kind of spelled out a little bit that like the first part of it, it follows mostly one of the characters. There's a handful of major characters, and they're sort of like college age mostly. And the first part of it involves this tech that's sort of it's called Me First, and it's like a smart kind of buying app that tracks, of course, all your information and all your purchasing and all that, and it does predictive purchasing. So it's basically like, you know, I think you probably want to buy this product at this price, and so I
Mhm.
ordered it for you. There it is, and you get big discounts like that because it kind of reads your mind basically to figure out what you might want and gets it for you cheap and easy. But and then if you don't want it, you can always return it. You know, so that's kind of people's attitude with it. So it's
Okay.
I'm like a little bit, you know, poking fun at people for this stuff because you know it's like just let the computer handle everything, deliver me all the stuff, you know. But that part of the story is sort of set in like a it's not clear when the stuff's set, but it's sort of like maybe turn of the century kind of, you know.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit back in time is the way it feels. And then the next part you get into that it's kind of shifted. You know, the tech is more about this the smart lens that you put in your eyes, and it reality augmentation. You know, so basically the applications for that are, you know, major. There's lots of applications for the, you know, like for example, one character is in a coffee shop, and she's wearing like she's a quality assurance, you know, tester for these
Mhm.
things, and so she gets the product before other people have it, and she's wearing these lenses, and she's able to use the lenses to see somebody in the coffee shop that she thinks she might want to, you know, check out for a date or something. And
Mhm.
so she brings them up and she sees their social profiles and stuff and kind of flip,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
so she's able to
Mhm.
just do this at a glance, you know, because she's wearing these things. And so that part of the story is more about how that affects everything and how kind of messed up that winds
Mhm.
up being, because it's
Mhm.
just total surveillance. Everyone's wearing these, you know, things.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so the first technology is pretty invasive. The next technology is even more invasive, and then when you get to the third part, the focus in the tech tends to be on like this drug. It's sort of a drug. It's part nanotechnology. But it's basically, yeah, it goes into your system, and yeah, so things go really off the rails at that point. So it's all about affecting your body and your perception of reality and everything. So yeah, and as it progresses, it's like a little bit further in the future, the way that it's, but I won't say too much because everything's pretty loose, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah, that's very much in line with like Philip K. Dick. So another show that was inspired by him was definitely Black Mirror.
yeah, for sure.
For sure. Oh, your second part of what you were talking about, it reminds me of one of those episodes. What was it? I think it was something that it was kind of a similar concept, but I always thought that was a really interesting concept and an interesting way to put it, because like we're at this point where you can pretty much uh, push somebody out of society if you want to.
Yeah,
Like you can take away somebody's, if they post something on social media, regardless of what it is that you think it is, if they have a big following or whatever, and they post something it is that society deems as not good or not normal, you can basically push them out of society completely.
yeah. The more people get dependent on these kind of things, the more somebody can flip the off switch on them, you know. It's
Hmm.
yeah, and so that's the bargain, you know. That's the Faustian bargain, is like you take all this cool tech and you get involved in all these systems and it helps you connect and all this, but it's like, well, you're not in control of your own life anymore, though, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're entering into this interesting phase where technology has, on the one hand, it's on the one hand, it's enriched our lives in that, like, most of the people, what, a couple hundred years ago, they were farmers, and so
Mhm.
you didn't have time to do anything else other than farm. That was pretty much what you did from the time you got up to the time you went to bed, right? In the not too distant past. Now we're in this situation where it is that, if you can figure out a way to do it, you can write novels and make that your
Yeah,
full-time living and travel the world. Like, there's so many different
yeah,
things, and all of these different things it is that we need have been uh, they've been outsourced to other sources. But the other thing with that as well is that you have these corporations that are coming in and that are taking things and manipulating it. Like, I remember reading about Monsanto. I think it was Monsanto, the company
boo.
that grows all the
Yeah,
artificial,
yeah,
and like they had a farm, and I guess one of the seeds or something drifted into like a local person's farm and it started to grow, and they
yeah,
basically came in there and sued
yeah.
this.
And I saw about that too. I've protested against Monsanto before. I'm not a fan,
Yeah.
but it's also very suspicious. It's like, oh yeah, so something drifted over, really, and then you're able to go inspect the field and find out that your seeds are being, your copyright's being violated, and now we get to take over that competing farm. It's very suspicious. It's like they could have very easily just like tossed them over the fence, and then they benefit from that by
Hmm.
suing them. You know,
Yeah.
it's very shady. Yeah.
I think at one point they tried to make it that vitamin C, you would have to have a prescription for it, right?
Wow. I don't know. I haven't heard about that. But I mean, just the basic idea of like people think about like genetically modified stuff, and there are some beneficial uses for that. Sure, people think
Mhm.
of it like because this is the advertising, the marketing for it is like, oh, we're going to grow bigger stuff and it's going to be more nutritious and whatever. It's like, sure, you can do that, but the main things that people are doing is more like, I want this plant to survive whatever poison I put on it. And so
Mhm.
all the bugs will die, all the other plants will die, but this one plant that's been genetically modified will live. So we can dump all of our poison on it because yes, we make the poison too, in addition to the plants. So it's the full thing, money making all around. And so you wind up with food that's covered in this poison, and you're not genetically modified to withstand the poison. So
Mhm.
it's not great. And then also, another big use of it is like seeds that only last one season. So people can't just like grow their crops and take the seeds and grow the next year's crops. They have to keep buying new
Wow.
seeds every year. And that's just evil. It's just like so basically evil, you know. But
Yeah, it's like we're trying to manipulate things and trying to put like a copyright on everything.
yeah.
And there's going to have to be, at some point, we're going to have to realize that, um, like, it doesn't work that way. Like, nature is designed really perfectly. Like, there was a documentary I was watching on mushrooms. I'm a huge fan of mushrooms,
Yeah.
and different kinds, obviously.
Sure.
But they were talking about how much we fuck up the ecology of like forests by going into a forest and we cut down a bunch of trees, and then we go back and we start planting like one kind of tree, like an oak
Yeah.
tree, and
Yeah.
we plant like fields of them, and we think like, oh, okay, everything is fine now, but it isn't, because there's a system that's underneath
Mhm.
that these different trees are communicating to each other through sugar, right?
Mhm.
And one of the ways it is that they do that is through mushrooms.
Yeah.
But anyway, the
It's
documentary was basically
complicated,
about,
basically. Yeah.
yeah, it's very complicated. The ecology of like how a forest is actually survives is very complicated. And without that, you can't get the richness of nature in terms of like the natural um, the natural things it is that you could take that would cure an illness instead of something that somebody invented or genetically modified.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and and so much, so often the kind of medications and stuff. I mean, they're plant derived generally, but
Hmm.
they just like processed in the way that like you have a coca leaf, and then you can eventually turn it into crack. It's very different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so our medication is very processed and very much like maybe you should be looking at the original sources a lot more rather than processing it to death.
Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of this. So where can everybody find you? I know I'm going to put your descriptions in the links below, but
Well, yeah, you go to cliffjonesjr.com with just JR. So like this, but with a com at the end. And I've got my links to the different social media stuff that I'm on there. You can, I mean, probably the easiest way to find that is at the bottom. There's little icons, but let me see. There's also a dream punk group that I created years back on Facebook. So
okay,
there's like 1,000 people on there that are in that group, and it'd be cool, drop in and
okay.
yeah.
Dream Punk.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and then the books are for sale. Like on my website, you can find the books. I link to them, and they're on Amazon, of course. But there's other ways to get it too.
Do you use like some fulfillment service, or do you fulfill them yourself?
It's the publisher. They
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to have all of Cliff's links in the description below, his social media and his website, if you want to go there and check out his books. My name is Wes. You can find the Philip K. Dick comics that I've done so far in my links below, as well as my print shop. And thanks, guys, for watching. Y'all have a great day.